Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Community's Resiliency Project. This is celebrating Foster Care Awareness Month. Just a few notes before we get started. Your microphone is muted and your video is off for the entire event. The Q&A is open, so please ask our guests your questions. And then we are asking that there's no recording of any kind, no photography and no video recording. And as we wait for attendees to join, we wanted to make sure you knew that the Santa Cruz Public Libraries has an app available free from the App Store on both your iPhone and your Android devices. You can use it for self-checkout and renewal of your materials. You'll go to My Account and then self-checkout, and then you scan the barcodes and you're ready to go. I'm now going to turn things over to Jimmy and Najeeb to start our program. Jimmy, over to you.
Everyone. I know many of you, but if you don't know me, I'm Jimmy Cook. I'm the program director for CASA of Santa Cruz County. We provide advocacy and a voice for children and youth involved in the juvenile court system in Santa Cruz County. Most of our work is with foster youth, but we more recently have begun to serve youth involved in the juvenile justice system as well. We train and supervise community members like many of you listening today to walk alongside a child or a youth or even a young adult and offer guidance and support to ensure their needs are being met while going through the juvenile dependency and juvenile justice system. By trade, I'm a social worker, and I began my professional career as a social worker working with our local child welfare system here in Santa Cruz County, keeping families together when possible and finding alternative housing when necessary. The month of May each year is recognized nationally as Foster Care Month. We take time each May to acknowledge all members of the community who help children and youth in foster care find permanent homes and connections if and when they are not able to return to their home of origin. It's important to remember that we first make strong efforts to keep families together and reunite families that are split apart due to abuse and/or neglect. Until the establishment of the United States Children's Bureau in 1912, child welfare and foster care was under the control of private and religious organizations. It was not something that our government managed. It was around that time that it was determined by the United States Department of Health and Human Services that children should reside in their own homes whenever possible, and when not possible, that they would reside in a foster home. Today, we use the term resource home to describe any family or home that cares for a child that is under the juvenile court supervision and being monitored by the Department of Family and Children's Services. A resource home could be that of a relative, a friend, a neighbor, or community member, known or unknown to the child. For the purpose of today's discussion, you will hear foster parent or resource parent used by the panelists interchangeably. There are around 420,000 children nationwide that end up, by no fault of their own, removed from their parents' care and put into a new environment, sometimes so foreign that they have no connection with their family or community of origin. The older the child, the more likely it is that they end up further away. This is especially true for teenagers and young adults. We hope we can learn from each other today what can make a difference if we were able to keep the youth of our community in our community and keep them connected to their school, their friends, their family, and the things that they consider to be their home, and most importantly, to be in a home that treats them as if they were a member of their family, even if they don't always act like it or feel like it. We have several members of the professional world that serve foster youth on our panel today, including our judge, the director of child welfare in Santa Cruz, the social work supervisor of the resource family approval team, and some of our community members with lived experience like a resource parent, a court-appointed special advocate, AKA a CASA, and our three special guest stars, 2 former and 1 current foster youth from Santa Cruz County. We hope you will especially listen to their voices. They are the experts on the subject of foster care. And finally, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator and longtime colleague and friend, Najeeb Kamil, who is a social worker and current senior analyst for the Human Services Department of Santa Cruz County. How you doing, Najeeb?
I'm good. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Jimmy, and kind of giving an overview of child welfare. As Jimmy mentioned, I'm a senior analyst with Family and Children Services for the County of Santa Cruz Human Services Department. And our agency is responsible for working with families where there is neglect or abuse. And of course, the focus is always on the safety of the child and the support for parents to strengthen families and promote safe and nurturing homes for children. And so, what I'm going to kind of get us started around is just some data, some statistics that might be, I think, set the stage for our conversations that we're going to be having with our esteemed guests and panelists. So moving on to the first slide, are some really general statistics, children and youth who are in foster care. So in the US, we have about 424,000, excuse me, children in foster care. In California, we have about 53,000. And in Santa Cruz County, we have about 125. And when I say 125, that's children who are in out-of-home care. We have a total of about 250 children who are engaged with our system. Some children and families stay together, and some end up being temporarily, hopefully, in out-of-home care. Going on to the next slide. So it's really some important outcomes that we want to talk about. This information is really specific to the nationwide statistics. And this can be found in the Annie E. Casey Foundation 2018 report. And some of these statistics are actually very sobering, right? So half of older teens who left foster care and aged out versus being reunited or connected with a family. A third have been removed from their home and placed in foster care multiple times, right? That instability. And then half have experienced 3 or more foster care placements. And a third experienced a group home or institutional placement during their most recent stay in foster care. And this data is for 0 to 17-year-olds, and about a third of the children and youth who are surveyed in this report are 11 to 17 years old. So a big chunk are older youth. Let's go to the next slide. And so talking a little bit more about the experiences that foster youth have, and this is specifically for California, part of the Cal Youth Study, which is an ongoing study designed to evaluate the impact of foster care and extended foster care, which is the ability for young people to stay in foster care beyond the age of 18 up to 21. So we see that almost a quarter of youth reported being homeless at one point. More than half of the youth who had been homeless reported being homeless for more than 30 days since their last interview with the interviewers. And then about 31% of youth were neither enrolled in school nor employed. But interestingly enough, most youth who responded to this survey, and that was 616 youth were actually part of this sample size, they were very optimistic about their personal hopes and goals for the future, with 59% responding that they were very optimistic, and about 33% responding fairly optimistic. And so what I'd like to do now is kind of turn this over and ask our young people who are part of the panel to give us some input about the statistics that I just mentioned. But before I do that, I do want to say that, I'm in awe of the courage that both Raquel, Karen, and all three, Raquel, Karen, and Zahira, are displaying to be on this panel to talk about their experiences, to give really voice to the statistics that I just mentioned. And so what I'd love to do is, have each of you, Raquel, Karen, and Zahira, just talk about your thoughts about the statistics that have been shared. And is that consistent with your experience? What about your own experience do you think would be important for our community to know about foster youth? So Raquel, I'll start with you, and please, take about 30 seconds to a minute to just let us know about yourself before you answer the question.
Hi, my name's Raquel. I was in foster care in Santa Cruz from the ages of 10 until I aged out at 21. I was also in foster care with my twin brother, and we lived in some homes together and some homes we weren't together. I would say that I did have some of these statistics be a part of my experience. I did live in about 12 different foster homes. And I did not end up being reunited with my family or ended up getting adopted by another family. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Raquel. Let's move on to you, Karen.
Can you guys hear me?
There you go. Yep.
Sorry. I'm Karen. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so bear with me if I start coughing. I also have been in foster care previously. I want to say when I was either 13, 14 till I was 18. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I did not look at the slides before I wrote what I was going to present today. And I can agree 100% with everything on the statistics of the slides. Regarding my experience and as a foster youth, I can say it was very challenging, uncertain and vulnerable time in my life. I didn't fit in with a lot of the placements, mainly because I was shut down. I was angry and hurt from, being home being away from home, and which led me to misbehave and have a bad attitude, making it hard for everyone to engage with me. My CASA was the only person who could actually was able to connect with me because of her being consistent. And finally, when I finally fit in a foster home was because I had worked through some of those emotions I felt before, and like the shame of like, oh, I'm a foster youth, people are going to think I'm a bad kid. I was able to live successfully with one foster family who to this day I adore. And unfortunately, it was just for a short time because I was already, like I said, aging out. I was about to be 18 with very little experience on life skills and what life was really about in the adult world. And that foster family was able to embrace me for who I was, and at the time and meet me where I was. And also I was able to allow them to do the same, to care for me, comfort me. And they didn't judge me. They didn't look at me like you're a troubled kid. I didn't, I was at 18 thrown out into the world. I got cut off from everything I knew, which was foster care, social workers, the independent living program, because at that time that was the only resource we had for teenagers, and it was scary.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you sharing that. Go for it, Zahira.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and follow up. I'm Zahira. I'm a current, I guess, non-minor dependent foster youth. So I'm not yet 21. I've got a few more months, but I have been formally in foster care since the age of 16. Informally, I guess, since the beginning of when I turned 16. So, just a few months of kind of living with an adult that I had already trusted kind of beforehand and knew. And then, 6 months after I initially moved into her home, I got formally placed into care. And I think, for as grim as these stats are, fortunately, I mean, these aren't very applicable to myself, which I know is very lucky and very rare with this, group and community. I think having an established relationship before being put into care, meant that it wasn't an emergency placement. I kind of already felt comfortable with who I was living with. I was living with a sibling, so we were together for most of that time. And I was already an older teen. And I like to say pretty independent by that time. So I did feel comfortable in my placement. I think in general, as stats go, I know we haven't really, touched on education stats that much, but in terms of, comfort and living independently, being someone who is a participant of, kind of AB 12 or extended foster care, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have been cut off at 18. So I am grateful that there are opportunities for 20-year-olds like myself who are still in care, but I also realize that, not everyone has the support network that I do, with having my resource parents, still kind of being connected with my bio family, and just having community support. So I am thankful for that. However, I do appreciate that, not all teens in care are lucky to have the support that I do.
Great. Thank you so much for everybody's insight. The thing that comes to mind that I heard from all three of you, the theme is having that one adult who is constant and supportive has really helped everybody. And so that's something to think about, that, as we go along, like how can the people who are attending the webinar, how can you be that potentially consistent adult in a young person's life who's in foster care? So I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy for the next question.
Thanks, Najeeb, and thank you to all the young voices that have shared. There's actually a comment already in the question about appreciation to all three of you for sharing with our community. So just wanted to pass that on right away. That's already coming in. And, as Najeeb mentioned, we've learned over and over again that having a consistent adult in a child's life or a youth's life is a life changer, and it's significantly important. And that was the origin of CASA. A judge in the 1970s, was having trouble making really, really important decisions that would impact children and families forever, and wanted more information, and decided that maybe we could bring some people in the community in, train them, supervise them, and coach them to be there for the child and elevate that voice in the court process. The expectations of child welfare social workers, I was in that role for 8 years. I know firsthand that the expectations are high, and in order to build a strong relationship with everybody that you're responsible to look after is nearly impossible. And so it's a lot to ask, and they work really, really hard, and we partner with them every day, but we're able to bring in, over 100 volunteers each year to work with over 200 children that are going through this process. And we have with us today a unique opportunity to hear from the voice of an advocate. Her name is Cindy Messer. And Cindy's been an advocate for over 10 years. And as a matter of fact, I'll highlight the fact that she has been in Raquel's life for longer than any other advocate has worked with a youth in our community. So this is a very special relationship that we have here. And I was curious, Cindy, if you could share first sort of what is your elevator speech? What is sort of the short, quick message you would share with someone that knows nothing about CASA when you bump into people? Because I know you're a fantastic ambassador and you're out talking to people all the time. And many people have come to us because of your ability to convince them that this is something that would be good for them to do and to give back. So what is it that you tell folks when you first meet them? You're on mute, Cindy.
There we go. I had a barking dog, so I muted it. I think one of the first things I say is I don't think, and I've been involved in many different programs and been a teacher and done a lot of things involving kids, but I've never done anything that's been quite so rewarding. And I feel like CASA, it's the staff at CASA, the way the training happens, the support you get as a CASA is very unique and incredible. I feel like I became a CASA. I've been a CASA for about 17 years. Raquel is actually my third youth that I've been supporting. And I think the fact that it's so tangible, that you actually are making such a difference in one child's life, you get to know them in such a deep and clear and unique fashion. You get to know who that child is, what their needs are, and really have a voice for that child in court is pretty remarkable, that you can make such a difference for these kids. The support that the CASA staff gives so that you're never alone. The training is extremely extensive. You really feel secure when you choose the child you're going to work with. I think it is such a meaningful, important program. You know, you meet with the child once a week to get to know them and do activities that are child-centered, and you have conversations with them, but you get to know what their needs are. And the other piece that I think is so important is that as a CASA, you meet with everyone involved in the child's life. So I consistently would meet with the therapist, the teacher, the medical professionals working with the child, the resource parents, and you really work as a team to meet all of the kids' needs, their emotional, their physical, educational needs. It's an extensive, very thorough, complete program. And then at 2 to 3 times a year, you actually write a court report, which we are lucky in this county that the judges read and take very seriously. And in those reports, which is the mainstay of the program, you are the child's voice in court to help the judge make decisions about these kids' lives with as much information as they possibly can have.
And thank you for that, Cindy. That's extremely thorough, and I appreciate the fact that you've worked with so many different caregivers and resource parents and partners and community members to support the 3 different youth that you've served. And as you think about all of those caregivers and resource parents, what are some of the highlights from that experience? And feel free to share, you know, what's worked well and some of the things that didn't work so well, whatever stands out for you. But today we're in this position to recognize, you know, the impact that foster parents and resource parents can have supporting older youth. And our next speaker is actually going to be a resource parent. So, you know, what are some of those things that stand out for you?
No, I think the first thing with and as Raquel said, I was her advocate, or have been with her for over 10 years and in at least 10 different homes. The first thing that always came to my mind was how remarkable and how much respect I have for these families or person who open their homes to these kids. It's selfless, it's a remarkable thing to do. I think what was difficult, probably the most difficult with a lot of the families we worked with, they had not had any formal training And now that has completely changed in the system. And in order to be a resource family, most cases, you do need to go through a great deal of training. And Jimmy, you can speak. I'm sure somebody else will also speak more thoroughly about what the training is, which makes a huge difference. I think one of the difficulties was really gaining the trust of each of these families, where they didn't feel threatened by my role as a CASA. They were, so that they could be open to letting me shed light on what I knew about each of these kids, especially with Raquel, because I've been with her for such a long time. And because I had a close relationship with her, some of the families had a difficult time adjusting to that, and knowing that my role really was to support them. The highlights were when we really could work as a team, and the family or the foster parent or parents were open to working with everybody as a team. And then the benefit to the child was huge. I also think that each of these kids is so unique and has so much trauma. Almost all of them have gone through some kind of trauma. So when the families had not had the training and didn't understand the kind of trauma the kids had gone through, it was very difficult. And a lot of them felt that it was just bringing another child into their home and the children could be treated the same as their own children. And that really is counterproductive for these kids. Learning that these kids probably will not thank you daily and say, thank you so much for bringing me into your home. I love you, you're wonderful. That's not what these kids will do. Not taking things personally when some of these kids have to strike out and have anger and different issues is really important. And I think the training that's being done with the resource parents now is excellent and really making a difference for these kids. I think a couple of the resource parents where it was the most successful was when they didn't have huge expectations and were able to meet the child or the youth wherever they were at the time and really respect who they were. So those are some of my feedback.
Thank you, Cindy. That's some great insight. What I'm hearing you say is that you really need to, reconsider the expectations you have and focus on what that individual child or youth's needs are, and maybe potentially even put aside some of those old things that you may have learned that worked in the past if you'd raised other children, or maybe you were taught by your own parents, and work with the team to try to support that youth wherever they're at, whatever their needs are specific to them. And I think that's a good transition for where we're going next. And Najeeb, you want to introduce our next panelist?
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Cindy. Yeah, we have the privilege of having a resource parent with us today. And so I'm going to just kind of jump in, and Tammy, I hope that you can, spend a minute or so just introducing yourself and telling the attendees, what you would like them to know about yourself. But I would love for you to answer, a question about, how did you come to the decision in becoming a resource parent? And then what kind of training did you receive and ongoing support in that endeavor?
Well, my name is Tammy Rudd, and I have been a resource parent for slightly over a year now. May 6th was a date when I had the pleasure to welcome my foster child into my home. As far as a decision to make that happen, it was, I always felt that I had an extra space in my home. I had an extra room when my oldest daughter moved out. And I knew there were kids out there that needed places. So I talked to my 17-year-old and I was like, I want to wait till after you're out of school because, you don't know what kind of kid you're going to get. And, to have a 17-year-old girl in the house, I wasn't sure. And she's like, no, do it now. You need to do it now. So in the midst of COVID, when it first started, we decided to fill out an application and contacted Trevor, who's on this panel and got back to me. And let me tell you, it was the best decision I ever made. You know, jumped through a lot of hoops to get this kid in here, went from, was in a group home in a difficult situation, very traumatized child. And it was, yeah, very happy to bring the child into my house. And for those that were watching the camera, they actually poked their head in and were looking at the screen about 5 minutes ago. So you guys actually, oh, there you go. There's my foster child right there, poking in. So he's been with me for a little over a year. So,
Great. And
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead. No, just gonna follow up with like, so the training and the supports.
Yeah, no, so it was a whirlwind to try to get, because they had a child in mind for me, because with me being a lesbian, and there was a, you know, a need for this child to have that kind of support, wanting a woman in the household. So, I mean, background checks, I did classes of training, we did home visits, I had to prep my house to get ready for them, and lots of classes, including CPR. You know, I raised two other kids, and I didn't do CPR at all. So I did that. And then they did home visits. They did, Trevor and Delilah came to my house. And then I also had an independent agency come and make sure that the house was okay for the child to come into. And it took about a month, which I think was a pretty quick turnaround to get me approved. But with the situation we were in, we went ahead and did that.
Great. Thank you. And we know that, you know, resource parent has to, you know, ride the ups and downs of a young person's life, as does any parent who has a teen or young adult at home today. So can you talk a little bit about some insights with the community about, you know, helping them consider stepping into the role of a resource parent?
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. It has been the most, probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done. To see the child traumatized growing up, still traumatized, and to see them grow into the individual that they have. I mean, I describe it, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because, you know, there are definitely ups and downs, but I would not trade any of the downs for the ups. I mean, they way outweigh it. Very rewarding. You know, when I hear the story of the child, you know, they leave school, they'd throw their homework away. They would just, you know, pretty much a rebel. And now they're talking about going to college, you know, and actually just got a job that starts on Saturday. So, to see the difference in the child that you make is just, I'm about to cry, because it's again, anybody who's thinking of it, please do it. It is amazing what you can do for a child that really needs a home.
Thank you, Tammy. Appreciate that, and it's so inspiring to hear, you know, your experience and the impact that you've had. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And you know, I think I'm going to move it over to Jimmy to you know, take the next question and panelist.
Thanks, Najeeb. Thank you, Tammy, for being here with us today. I really appreciate your insight. I've said this to many people in this field, so I don't think it'll be a surprise to all the panelists or the community that the role of a foster parent or resource home is, for me, the most challenging, most complicated role of anybody involved in supporting youth in care. It is a 24/7, all day worry, parent in public. And so, you know, I say those things because I want people to understand that you're stepping into something really special and really difficult too. And we want folks that are interested in both those things, you know, that are able to understand that, because I don't want to sugarcoat it. You know, we want folks who have that ability to be flexible and to shift and to accept that there's going to be moments where you feel like things aren't going your way and you're going to have to adjust. And I think that's something that you do so beautifully, Tammy, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and to add to that, you know, I'm sure Trevor's gotten many of my phone calls, so it definitely is. It is very rewarding, challenging. You are spot on.
Thank you. And, you know, I think there's someone I don't really need to introduce to the panel, but maybe some of our community members might not know. But the Honorable Judge Timothy Schmal is our dependency court judge. And he pretty much knows everybody here because that's his job, is to get to know everybody. And Your Honor, you know, you must read and see a lot of unique family circumstances, and your role has to be extremely difficult. You make decisions every day that will impact the rest of a child's life, including returning a child back home to their family of origin or having to potentially terminate parental rights. You must know of many different situations, and you must know about the successes and struggles of foster youth in our community. So I'm just going to open the floor for you to share your perspective from the judicial bench about what youth need from resource parents and what your experiences are.
All right, thank you very much, Jimmy. So I think the number one need from a resource parent is to be open to the possibilities. We haven't really talked about the full range of placements that will happen with foster youth. We've kind of touched on it. You can have someone like Zahira who enters as a late teen, and that has a certain set of needs. Then you have sibling groups, and we've had as many as literally cases I've called this week, placement of 5 siblings together in a household. And age ranges, you know, we have fosters who step into a new situation with a newborn upon being released from the hospital with some serious medical needs because of some drug dependency issues. So the possibilities range from the harbor in the storm, and it may be a short-term placement, to the other end of the spectrum where you're the potential adoptive parents and everything in between. But the open to the possibility, there are many occasions where a very important role that you play is in helping facilitate the parents getting that reconnection with their children who have been removed from the home because of problems. They're making an effort to comply with their case plan so that, because in juvenile dependency, and I have to say this at the outset of every new case, the goal in juvenile dependency is not to pull families apart, but to bring them back together. But based on the statistics that Najeeb introduced at the beginning, we know so many times the reunification between birth parents and the children, that doesn't happen. So in my role, for example, I get to preside over adoptions that happen where there's such a strong relationship that develops over time between the foster parents and the child or children. So last week, I presided over an adoption 2 weeks ago where, and this is the only good thing from my view that's ever come from the pandemic, I had about 120 to 140 people attend an adoption hearing that I presided over involving a brother and a sister. So open to the possibilities means, you know, maybe you are the long-term solution for this child or children, but what you need to provide is love, patience, support, oftentimes with the child, a good deal of grace and giving youths their space, but knowing that they're in a safe place where they're going to be nurtured and cared for and loved.
Wow. That is a lot to consider. But I think that you're hammering the point home that seems to be consistent, that each family, each youth has a very specific need that is unique to them. And as a team, our obligation, and that's what we try to do every day for folks who aren't familiar with the child welfare system and the dependency court system, is that we all work together to do our best to make sure that the children are in the best situation possible. And it's not easy to do that. There's a lot of opinions about how children should be raised. I guess we could have that conversation all day long. But the ultimate goal is that they're being nurtured and they're in a space that they can thrive. And when we think about this system that people call the child welfare system, and I think we have someone who's had a wealth of experience on the panel today that could provide some oversight. I mean, we could spend hours. I went through grad school to learn about this, so we're not going to get to all of it today. But Najeeb, could you introduce someone that we know as a child welfare director, you know as your boss?
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Judge Schmal, for your insight. Yes, I'm going to introduce Robin Luckett, who is our Family and Children Services Division Director, and she has a wealth of experience. And I'm going to let her talk about, introduce herself. But before she does that, the question that we would love to hear from you, Robin, about is, what is the role of the child welfare social worker in the life of a foster youth? And then what is your hope for youth in foster care?
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. I feel very privileged to be here, and I hope that part of the messaging that folks are hearing is it truly does take a village. I have been with Santa Cruz County for approximately 8 months as the child welfare director, and prior to joining Santa Cruz County, I worked in Alameda County for over 29 years. And I also, like Najeeb and like Jimmy, started out as a social worker. And I was fortunate to work with children, youth, and their parents with the goal of reunification. That is still near and dear to my heart. Whenever possible, we want our children to be able to go back home or to stay home with their birth family. And so when I think about the role of a social worker, and child welfare has evolved over the decades, and the social worker's role has also evolved. So currently, a lot of what the social workers are doing they are making assessments regarding risk and safety. And part of that assessment is whether or not the child can safely remain in the home of their family, of their birth parent. And as we have continued our evolution, social workers have also learned that it's important to listen, not only to the adults, but also to the young people and the children, to ask them, what's working well in your family dynamics? What does it look like when you have a good day with your family? What does it look like when it's not such a good day? And what are your dreams, hopes, and aspirations? So social workers have a multifaceted role. They spend time with the family, they spend time with the children and the youth, and they create their own independent relationship. Not as close as like a CASA would or as a resource caregiver, because they're not seeing the child typically weekly or every single day, but they have the ability to create a relationship and to be a connection for that young person as they pursue getting their needs met, either through resources, through referrals, for just having another person to be a part of their life and to help create the network for that young person as they go through the child welfare system. So those are some of the roles of a social worker. In addition, a social worker also goes before Judge Schmal with information about that young person or about that child, as well as what the family is doing, how they are, it was referenced to case plan. Is the parent meeting the objectives of their case plan? Is the young person meeting their objectives of their case plan? as young adults, they also have responsibilities and case plan objectives so that they will achieve independence, whether it be at 18, 21, or when they're fully emancipated or exiting from the child welfare system. I think for the youth, a social worker can represent an ally, can represent someone who they can call when they're frustrated with their resource caregiver, someone they can call when they have questions about a teacher or education or their attorney or what the judicial process looks like. So again, I think it's a very multifaceted role. I think the other thing is that a social worker is able to be kind of a liaison between the young person and the resource caregiver. So if one or the other is having some challenges or not quite sure how to manage a situation or an event that is happening within the home, they can be that bridge. They can also, along with the resource caregiver, along with somebody in that young person's community or network, along with the youth, call for a child and family team meeting where we bring everybody together and have a conversation about what's currently working well in the home. Where are the struggles? What else is needed to support the family in the placement? And what does the young person identify as their needs so that their voice is also lifted up? And as you've heard this evening, the voice of our youth and our young adults is really the most critical voice that we all need to listen to. So I think even though it's a complex role for a social worker, it's a very rewarding role that they have. They get to meet amazing resource caregivers, fabulous CASAs who offer support to our children, and then incredible youth who are what we're all hoping that our community can continue to support as they grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for sharing, all that information about the role of a social worker. And really, the social worker is kind of like that facilitator that connects the young person with all the resources and referrals, as you mentioned, as well as that connection and support with the resource parent. So I definitely appreciate that, that insight and how it really does take a village. We've kind of heard that theme throughout the different panelists. It takes a team, and it takes a team with the young people at the center of that team. And so I'm gonna shift it over to Jimmy to kind of help us get started in terms of how does one become a resource parent? How can somebody be that stable person, stable adult in the life of a young person?
Thanks, Najeeb. And Robin, you make me think that maybe someday I'll become a social worker again, child welfare. We'll see. Maybe when I grow up, I'll be able to do that. Robin, I don't know if you know, but I've known Trevor for my entire professional social work career. Trevor Davis has been a social work supervisor since I started as a social worker in Santa Cruz County. He was actually my unofficial boss for a minute because when I started, my boss was on her honeymoon. And so I remember meeting Trevor and getting my first pile of cases that was extraordinarily tall in the physical sense. But at the same time, the family I work with had the challenges that we've been hearing today. And I learned quite a bit under your watch. Here today, you were here in the capacity as the Resource Family Approval Supervisor. And as you introduce yourself, we hope that you can share a little bit about what this process is like for our audience and what some of the reasons community members might need to have in order to step into the role of fostering the youth. I know this is something you take very seriously and you've done for a while, and I appreciate you being here.
So good to be here and so good to be part of this amazing panel. And I think I should start with my elevator speech. So When people have approached me over the years with the idea of becoming a foster parent, a resource parent, and the like, they've usually screened themselves out. They're usually have already made a decision that they're not wealthy enough, that they are single and not married, that they're not heterosexual, that they're too young, they're too old, that they're not homeowners, that there's a perception out there that that you have to have a really specific kind of life or family situation going on for the state to approve you to be a foster parent. And the reality is just a really different thing. So the main thing you need to become an approved caregiver to foster kids is bedroom space. You need, as has been said a few times better than I can say it, you need to have the flexibility. You need to have the humility. You need to have the ability to be part of a team that is helping a kid heal. You need the ability to not personalize and realize that the starting point for a case involving a foster child or foster youth is not about you, it's about them. And you need to be able to hang with whatever direction things go in. And that's a skill set. That's an amazing skill set, and it's what we need. The rest of what you need to become a foster parent, because obviously we are a governmental agency that follows governmental rules. There's paperwork, there's verifications, there's background checks and all those sorts of things. That's the kind of stuff that I cover in orientations, which I know we will be talking about in just a little bit. A couple of the things I want to say that I feel worthwhile here, and one of them is the flip side of the story that Tammy told. And Tammy, I loved hearing the story of how it all started for you. What I remember is that at that point, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and the orientations I was doing were kind of one-on-one over the telephone. And so there I was talking to Tammy, telling her things that she would need to know. And I made a passing, vague example to kind of underscore kind of the placement needs that we had and the youth that were needing placement, all the rest. And I described a kid. And Tammy latched on and she said, yeah, that one. I want to know more about that one. And then next time I called her, she asked about the kid again and wanted to know when she could visit the kid and how do we move this along and all the rest. And she was excited. That's exactly the kid that we placed with her. And that's exactly what we need. We need people who are excited, who are have that kind of internal motivation and really want to be part of this process of being on a team and being that good, and figuring out who the right kid is for your family. How can you be of service to the right kid? Another example like that, we had a kid who I thought of it, this is a 13-year-old boy who was a skater kid and in a group home kind of setting and really wanting to be connected with the family. And then lo and behold, a skater family kind of emerged at an orientation, came forward, and it's a married couple with no kids. And the guy is a skater, still does, and rides bikes and all that kind of stuff. And it was just such an inherent fit. And the idea of putting them together made sense. And we did put them together, and it did make sense, and it does make sense. They're still together, and it's just this amazing fit. And so when I think about the kids that are needing placement, that's what I know works. It's when we are really being able to look at finding the right family that is going to meet the kids' needs in that particular way. It's about finding families that are open to taking the supports that we can offer, because this is a road that has challenges attached to it and all the rest. That's what we do. I will tell you that the most compelling measure that I can point to of how we need to move forward, how we need to do the best work we can possibly do, and all the rest, is when I think about the foster youth in Santa Cruz County who are in what we call STRTPs, short-term residential treatment programs, which is more conventionally called a group home. I believe the slide that Najeeb reviewed told us that there's 125 kids in the foster care system. So that goes from like the newborn who got removed a couple nights ago, all the way through to that 17-and-a-half-year-old kid. And that's everybody. That's kids who are going to go home to birth mom or birth dad. That's kids who it's already been determined that they're not very likely to go Of that 125, I actually looked up the data right before I logged on tonight. There are 8 kids who are in a group home kind of setting. And so that's 8. What I can say is it's only 8, which is a pretty good number. It's not very many kids. And I say that not to pat ourselves on the back or anything like that. I say that because it feels like a really manageable problem. We only need to find 8 amazing families for these kids to be able to link those kids to being, rather than in an institution, which is where they are now, but to being with a family, being somewhere where they can, my screen just did all kinds of things. So hopefully I'm still on and all the rest. But something, a place where kids can go for Thanksgiving, place where kids can go for Thanksgiving when they're 18, when they're no longer living in that home. A place where there's somebody to share successes and help the kid kind of work out the non-successes and all the rest. So that's who we're looking for. And if it's anybody listening tonight, that's amazing. I hope you will be in touch with us and figure out next steps and all the rest. If it is not you, please carry this message and help us find the person who can provide this kind of home and this kind of family to our kids who need that. So anyway, I really, really enjoyed being on here tonight, and thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. I love your passion, and I know that this is something that's meaningful for you, and it's something that's important. And I know something you didn't mention about yourself, which I think is important to know, is you're also a parent that's adopted children. And so you know exactly what this is like. You know what this process is. You know what it was to start with 2 young children that had experienced grief and trauma at a very, very young age, and now are reaching the double digits of their years, 9 and 10 years later. So you are someone who provides that voice, and you could be someone who speaks real and true to folks about what this is about. And I appreciate that.
Thank you. To repeat what Tammy said, because it's true for me too. It's the absolute best thing I've ever done with my life. It's just, it's been an amazing journey. It still is, and it'll continue to be.
Thank you. And, in the spirit of supporting the actual voice that we are most interested in hearing from, we're going to shift back to have our youth share some thoughts at the end here. And Najeeb, can you take the lead on that?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Trevor. Definitely inspiring as usual. And we put up some information about how to become a resource parent, and that information will also be provided later on. So let's kind of end this part of the presentation with the voices of our youth and young adults. And we're going to go in the same order as we did before. So we'll start off with you, Raquel. And so we would love to hear from all of you about what worked for you best to help you get to where you are today. And thinking about what resource parents can offer, what are your ideas about what needs to happen to improve outcomes for foster youth?
Yeah, I would say for me, I had a lot of families who didn't have training back when I was in foster care, and thankfully that has changed. And I think that's a huge help, because I think that was part of why I had so many different homes over the years. Honestly, the best thing that ever happened was getting Cindy. For me, she was somebody, it wasn't her job to talk to me like a social worker or a therapist, and I could get a hold of her after 5 o'clock on Monday through Friday, which was a blessing. And she really just gave me somewhere to let me be and didn't have expectations for what was going on. I think I had a lot of families who had their own kids and just kind of jumped into wanting to parent me as I had parented their own children. And it wasn't really working for me, and having them want me to focus on school when, I'm not knowing if I'm going to go back to my family. I'm getting separated from my twin brother who I've been in homes with. Like, school was definitely not essential to me. I had to grow up, and I was more focused on where I would be living the next day or a week from then or a month from then, and school didn't really matter. And just Cindy really was my saving grace. I don't know what I would do without her. Things that I think could be helpful for foster parents is, I think we've talked about this a lot, is to not take things personal, read books based on this kind of stuff. And my biggest thing is, I'm sure we've all had traumas of our own, and I really think it's important for people who are thinking about taking in a foster kid to really make sure that you have healed from your trauma that you've experienced in your own life before you take on a kid and try to help them with their trauma that they've experienced.
Thank you, Raquel. That was deep. Thank you for providing that insight. Karen.
Am I muted? Hi.
No, you're good.
What worked best for me was having a CASA advocate during that entire painful process of being in foster care. Having her be my voice when I felt I didn't have a voice anymore. Having a person that was there no matter what and showed me genuine love with no motives behind it, and was what she really wanted to do. Having a safe space, I think for teens or youth, even after 18, like AA or NA with children, that have substance abuse history, and programs like the independent living program that teach you skills on how to live outside of foster care, outside of group homes, once you get kicked out to the real world. I think it's important. I think that this community definitely needs to understand that just because we're teenagers in foster care doesn't mean that we're broken humans or that we're there because of the fault of our own. I think if all cultures could be educated on what big and significant life impacting changes they can have in older youth and stick with them through tough times and good times, youth would be less inclined to run away or be moved out or into placement. Sorry guys, my kids are I think breaking the barriers to qualifications to who can foster youth and be a CASA advocate is something that can also help. Many families are willing to help, but because they're undocumented or they have history, or previous history with hold on, mama, with CPS or something, there's some barrier, that prevents them or disqualifies them from being a potential placement or advocate for foster youth. Having resources like CASA advocates is amazing. They not only work with the youth, but with the entire family as well. Making a family be a part of everything is also key, because it's not just the youth who may need the help. Like they said, it takes a village, and what better village than our own to help. I also think that resource parents should meet youth where they're at and just don't give up on youth, especially the tough ones like myself, because those are generally the most that need from a resource parent. And also don't compare us to your other youth or children or your own. Treat us like you would treat your own child. For whatever time frame we're with you, make us feel like we're part of your home, even when we're in group homes. And I say we because I still feel that part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's powerful, about being treated like you're part of the home, and mentioning about meeting young people where they're at, no matter where they are at. And so I appreciate that. Great. Zahira.
Yeah, so I think in terms of things that worked for me, the two that come to mind, and I understand that they'll be different for every youth that comes into your life. But the first one was, I guess, I'd always hear it called prudent parenting, which I think is kind of the language or the lingo that's used. But I feel lucky in that my foster parents allowed me to, hang out with friends, go to movies, get my driver's license, go to school games, have a job, just do things that made me feel normal instead of feeling even more outcasted than I was already. And I think being able to participate in a school sport or go to prom obviously allowed me to have those normal social interactions. But I also think it didn't make me feel as though, oh, these are people who are controlling of me and are, doing X, Y, and Z. It really made me feel as though, these are two people who, at least like me enough to allow me to do these activities, which, they want me to be like a normal youth. So that to me was, I think, the biggest thing. They allowed me to keep my phone, have social media, do all the things that, a 16-year-old girl wanted to do. So that to me was, key. And I think, again, something that, isn't applicable to everyone, but another thing that I think really saved or made me feel comfortable was allowing me to maintain that relationship with my biological family. And, obviously that's going to be touchy for everyone, but, for at least I can say for as much harm as they did, they're my family and I lived with them for 16 years. I'm not going to turn my back, after, one event, one night, one evening. So not shaming me into, oh, why are you communicating with, your mom, your dad, your sister, allowing me to have, conversations with them to, obviously, safely. They knew that I wouldn't, be in any harm, be with my dad or communicate with my sister. Again, obviously allowed me the sense of normalcy because that was my normal to be with my family. But obviously, kind of showed again that they, respected me enough as a young adult teenager and really trusted me to make the right decision and that I could be with, my family who I loved and also, still come back and be with them for dinner that night. So I guess, this all kind of boils down to just let them be normal, which I know there's no such thing, but we talked about trauma tonight and being in care itself is traumatic, let alone having to feel outcasted, especially as a teenager where everything is embarrassing, just makes things 10 times worse. So, just let them, have a job, have a boyfriend, girlfriend, go out to downtown, take the bus, and then also obviously within bounds, keep those relationships is more than I could ask for. And I think it's what every, at least teen in care would want.
Thank you, Zahira. Thank you for sharing. You brought up a really great point about, how can we help, young people have those quote unquote normal experiences in high school and growing up and making sure that we're providing that opportunity and not treating them in a way that is inhibiting those experiences that we all want to have when we're young. So I appreciate that. So I think now we are going to be heading into the Q&A. I know there's a number of questions and we'll try to get to them. But if you do have any other questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, just please add their name ahead of your question and we'll try our best to get to all of them. Jimmy, do you want to start us off with the first question?
Sure. First, I'll just make a comment that in the Q&A, some people made some really powerful statements about our three youth speakers. So I wanted to make sure each of you knew that there's lots of agreement about the points you're making, about your ability to articulate your message, and people are overall very impressed, and as are, I think, the rest of us. So thank you guys for that. I wanted to flip it upside down a little bit here real quick and throw it back to Trevor, and then we'll finish up with our youth voices. But Trevor, there's some specific questions that I think are generated because of some of the things you said. I want to make sure we answer. One is very narrow, and that is, what's the age range of the 8 children you referenced in these group homes, so that people have a sense of what we're talking about. And then I have a follow-up.
Okay, it's a really good thing I have 2 screens on my office computer. The age range is from 15 to 17.
All right, so there's 8 youth between ages 15 and 17.
Yes, I can tell you that we have a very young child who is sadly very likely to be on course into a group home or SCRTP setting. It's very atypical for our county and I think other counties, but we have an 8-year-old who may well, just due to some powerful behavioral challenges, may be on that same kind of course. But 15 to 17 is typical. I see kids, I see 14-year-olds often finding their way into SCRTPs. We've gone down as young as 11, but that's rare. So the is typical in terms of the age range.
Yeah, and then the next layer of that question is about, the question's phrased like this: are there levels of resource parent? Like, for example, could grandparents be occasional, rather than full time? And then the follow up to that is it, and particularly for aged out youth. So this is a really good plug for those youth that are 18 to 21. What's going on with them? Where do they live? Where do they stay?
I love these questions. So are there different levels of foster care in the way the audience member described? Not precisely, but we certainly have different kinds of needs. And so if you can't provide a 24/7 level of care to a foster kid, number one, you should perhaps talk to Jimmy of CASA about becoming a CASA, because that would be providing that kind of support with a kid not necessarily living with you. If you can provide not 24/7, but occasional kind of in-home support for a kid, if you want to be the person where a kid might go to have a weekend break from their family to give people cooling off times and things like that, be the person who can be a landing point while a resource family is going on a vacation where they're not, for whatever the reason, able to take their foster kid. That's a need. That's a thing that is incredibly useful for us. And so I see my name and numbers in the chat. If anybody has that vision, they should absolutely give me a call and I can talk about that in more detail.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. And we'll put up the information for how to contact you again at the end. And there's some questions now are directed towards our youth speakers. And I think the first one will be whoever's comfortable answering. Are there services other than the programs that existed when you guys were in care that don't exist that you would like to see in Santa Cruz that would help make children and youth in foster care feel more cared for?
Yeah, I guess I could go ahead and start. So I apologize because I can't think of anything brand new. But I will say maybe in cultivating a lot of these programs. So I know we have independent living program, and I know that we have a few, at least pre-COVID events, thrown by CASA or the county, like around the holidays or summer. And I think maybe, being more inclusive towards older teens in those events, or, even kind of having ILP obviously not be mandatory, but be, heavily suggested, would be, I think, a game changer. Because I know, at least in my experience, a lot of, kind of these services and are geared more towards younger youth, which is perfectly acceptable. However, as I keep mentioning, as a 16-year-old coming into this place where it's, everything is only for, 12 and younger, I don't feel as though it's my space. And to be honest, I don't feel wanted. I feel like, maybe what am I doing here? I'm a teenager, maybe just, everybody who's donated, we're thinking more about kids and they weren't really thinking about me. So I know a lot of other teenagers, at least that I've interacted with, kind of felt the same way, and that we're often forgotten. And I think Karen and Raquel mentioned, we're not bad people. I think bad things happen to us. And I think there is definitely a negative stereotype in that, oh, you're 17 and in foster care. What did you do to put yourself in this position? And the real question should be, what happened to you? Well, not really, but in your head, what happened to this child that they were, that this traumatic event happened? So to long-windedly answer your question, I think gearing anything kind of towards older youth and teens would be super helpful, no matter, whether that be a clothing drive once a year or just, up or amping up the independent living program.
Thank you, Zahira. That's excellent. And good focus. Raquel, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, me and Cindy have definitely talked about this over the years. And I remember when we were younger, one of the first things I thought of was, why can't I get matched up with an animal in the shelter and have that go with me to all my foster homes? Obviously, I don't know how that could be implemented or if it even should be, but that was one of my first things when I was younger. As I got older and was a teenager, I really started to struggle with not feeling like I could relate to my peers in the fact and my friends with everything that I was going through, and like not having my family and just moving in and out of homes. And I know there's complications with confidentiality, but I was really at one point looking for like support groups of other foster youth that I could connect with to maybe bounce things off of and not feel so alone. And Cindy and I at one point were matched with a younger CASA and a younger CASA or a foster youth. And we actually met a couple times, and hopefully we'll get back into that after COVID. Unfortunately, we had to stop meeting them because I was hit by a car, but hopefully we'll get back into that. But those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, you brought up a great example of how your voice and your inquiry and interest and curiosity led to a really interesting design of supporting another youth in care. That was your idea, that came from you. That wasn't something we'd done before intentionally. And we saw some success there. And so that youth hadn't had much time, if any, talking to another youth in foster care. And she got a chance to see kind of a big sister relationship. And I think that was definitely a benefit to her. So that was a beautiful thing to recommend. And I had a couple other questions, but I think the one that I'm looking at right now as I look at the time is directed at the youth. And it's specific about you guys today. And maybe each of you could take a minute to share, how do you take time to care for yourself? And what are your plans for the next year and into the future? If you could share some of your goals.
So I take care of my kids, of course. No, to take care of myself as therapy for myself. I do, since I can't foster, I foster animals. I rescue animals. I do this thing on the side called a hobby of like finding orphan babies and bringing them home and then finding homes for them, like this little guy right here. And there's always different ones at my house, which is great. And right now I'm also attending college, headed to get my AS degree in drug and alcohol counseling, to help women and, women and children who are battling that cycle. And I want to give back to the community in that area. And yeah.
Great.
I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's great. Zahira?
Yeah, so I think, so in terms of self-care, I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of now I like food, I guess I'll say that, and I like, buying clothes. So I think those kind of stem from, not having a lot of food, not having a lot of clothes when I was younger. So now that I'm kind of on my own, I I'll have sushi. That's like, wow, it's not, just rice and avocado. I have some imitation crab in there. And I enjoy, I live in a bike town, so biking around to thrift stores, honestly, just biking on the trails with my music is what I do, kind of to relax, even though I'm always pretty manic. But I think in terms of future, I'm still kind of young, so not yet 21. I did just, finish at UC Davis, so I somehow graduated early, which is, I don't know if that was the best move, but I did it, so it's done. And I'm currently working up in Yolo County with other foster youth. So through AmeriCorps service, I'm working with 12 to 21-year-olds, which has its own weird dynamic, but I think, I might go down that path and, continue. Maybe I'll, be a lawyer or a judge someday, or, I might do something completely different. So at this point, it's up in the air. I think I've got a few years to think about it. So yeah.
Thank you. Raquel, what about you? What do you do for self-care, and what are some of your goals and dreams for the future?
My biggest self-care that I have done over the years is me and Cindy drive around in the car and get food and just drive around in the car for hours, which hasn't been able to happen during COVID, but hopefully it will. Also, I hang out with my cat and my friends as an escape. I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. What are your goals for the future?
Oh, my goals. I'm at Cabrillo. My goal is to graduate. I'm hoping to be an X-ray technician. Another goal of mine is to eventually write a book with Cindy about my experience in foster care. A goal or a continuing goal of mine is to continue my advocacy that I do as this, and speaking at CASA trainings and foster parent trainings, and just using my experience to hopefully better the lives of future and former foster kids.
That's awesome. And I know that I'm not going to catch you off guard, because you've told me this several times, that you and Cindy have this plan that someday in the future you guys will co-CASA supporting siblings as CASAs once you get trained and go through the process. So I think that's an incredible experience. I'm not aware of that sort of dynamic, and we would definitely support that and honor that experience. You guys have a wealth of information and knowledge and experience to bring to the table and provide that love and care for a child. So we're winding down here. I think we're approaching the end of our time. There was a question, I think this was posed to me from some of our CASA volunteers, asking about the wait list of kids for CASAs, and if there is a wait list. And we're in this really amazing position today where we actually are building a wait list of volunteers, because we've had this dream for years that we don't want the kids to wait. We don't want children and youth to wait. We feel that the adults can wait a little bit, and then we'll have a better opportunity to match. So the more adults we have in the mix ready to serve youth, we can do a better job of matching demographics, matching interest and skills, like Trevor was talking about, the skater family matching up with the skater youth. Those are the exact things we'd like to do. And we're specifically really looking at trying to increase our number of volunteers of the Latinx demographic, and also that speak Spanish. That's something that we're really working on. And we have hired an outreach and recruitment manager to focus specifically on that. One thing I can share with everybody is that CASA does have a website. You're welcome to look at it. It's casaofsantacruz.org. It's really easy to find. There's great information there. Even if you just want to learn about some of the things that we've talked about today, we have all sorts of resources and trainings that are available online for anybody to look at. And also you can go to the Human Service Department website to find more information about Family and Children Services. And maybe Sarah, you could put up that slide that directs folks to Trevor to learn more about what the needs are to serve youth. And I'm wondering if there isn't another question I'm missing here, Najeeb, or if you had a final comment.
Yeah, I think there's just one other question that maybe, we can, maybe I'll pose to you, Robin, if that's okay. Is that, can foster parents potentially adopt their foster child at any age, or is foster adopt only for older children and teens? And there's a comment about, personal experience attempting to adopt a baby can be problematic.
So currently, whenever a child comes into care, we typically offer reunification services. And a parent, as they make progress with their case plan to reunify with their children, that can take 12 to 18 months. And until the court determines that that parent is not going to be able to reunify, the only option would be fostering. Once a parent, where it's determined by social worker recommendation and judicial order that that parent is not going to reunify with their child, then that child could potentially be available for adoption. So there's a process. So if you're looking to expand your family by having a child come into your home from the hospital, that doesn't happen often because of parental rights. And we want to make sure that we ensure parental rights. And children are available at any age. It just depends on where the family is in the judicial and the child welfare process.
Great. Thank you, Robin, for answering that question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. We're running, to the end of our time. It's been really amazing and powerful to hear from, especially the youth and young adults and all the professionals and the resource parent and CASAs. I mean, this work is difficult work, and it takes a team, and it's very, very inspiring work, and it's very valuable work that the community, is engaged in, and really, this supporting young people as they go through the foster care system, it really does take the community. It can't just be the responsibility of the resource parents or the CASA or the social worker or the judge. It's really everybody's responsibility. And so it's like, how can we work together to ensure the best experience and outcomes and the healing process for young people? And there's different ways to get involved in that process, as Jimmy has mentioned, as Trevor has mentioned. If you're willing to commit to, being that stable 24/7 adult in a young person's life, then definitely, hit up Trevor and figure out how you can be a part of that process and get that going. If you want to be more of a mentor and don't maybe have that ability to be 24/7, but really want to be in the life of a young person, then maybe the CASA is the route to go. So definitely talk to Jimmy, go to the website. And yeah, appreciate everybody attending and the great questions. And I think that's it for us.
Yep, thank you. And this is going to be recorded, so we'll have it available on the Santa Cruz Library homepage, and you're available to share that and pass it around, because that might be a great way to help other folks understand what's going on in our community. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate for our community being here. And I wanted to celebrate all of our panelists and thank you guys for your time, and hope you stick around for a moment so we can have a debrief and share the love. Cheers, everybody.